It's time for another exciting episode of the Gospel according to Mark. So we have seen Jesus heal and restore people and teach in various places. But today he is going to his hometown, and we will see how he is received there from those who knew him before he took on the mantle of his role. The Gospel according to Mark. The Gospel of Mark 6:1. Jesus went away from there and came to his own country and homeland, Nazareth, and his disciples followed with him. 6:2. And on the Sabbath he went to teach in the synagogue, and many who listened to him were utterly astonished, saying, "Where did this man acquire all this? What is the wisdom, the broad and full intelligence which has been given to him? What mighty works and exhibitions of power are wrought by his hands?" 6:3. Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James, and Joses, and Judas, and Simon? And are not his sisters here among us? And they took offense at him, and were hurt, that is, they disapproved of him, and it hindered them from acknowledging his authority, and they were caused to stumble and fall. So Jesus is in his hometown, and he is teaching in the local synagogue, and people are there. And people are astonished and they're amazed of his teaching. This is something we saw throughout his journey. But we see that some people here, those who knew him in his youth, those who have a pre-existing connection to him, they're unable to take in that in which he is teaching. They are stuck up in their preconceived notions of who he is and who his family is. And they're missing the point as to what it is that he is indeed teaching to them. This is a very harsh truth and something very spiritual that a lot of Christians encounter as well. That even when we go and try to preach the gospel to our family members or friends that we knew in our childhood, that they simply cannot understand what it is that is going on. They don't know the metamorphosis. They don't know the great change that occurs. They are only looking at them in the eyes of their preconceived notions. This is the same as when one encounters their grandparents, and they're always viewed as that little child. Or parents as well. It's quite a common thing, really. But we see here that even though Jesus knows this is the reality, he is still attempting to reach these people. He hasn't given up. It's just that his message is not received in the best way. And we're going to see what he is going to say about this reality here. The Gospel according to Mark 6:4. But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor, deference, reverence, except in his own country and among his relatives and in his own house." 6:5. And he was not able to do even one work of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sickly people and cured them. 6:6. And he marveled because of their unbelief, their lack of faith in him. And he went about among the surrounding villages and continued teaching. So they didn't receive him. They didn't receive his teaching. I mean, he tried. He put in all the effort. And he was limited on what he could do as a result of their unbelief. So what did he do? He went and continued his journey in the surrounding villages, places that didn't have that preconceived notion of who he was. And he was able to continue his role there and heal those people, cast out those demons, and teach. But in his hometown, he wasn't able to do all that much because of their unbelief. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:7. And he called to him the 12 apostles, and began to send them out as his ambassadors, 2 by 2, and gave them authority and power over the unclean spirits. This is an incredible verse because it echoes the future of the apostles. The apostles, they have been with Jesus for some time. They have listened to his teachings. They have witnessed his healing, and they have seen the demons being cast out. And now Jesus is giving them authority so that they can do likewise. And he is not sending them out alone. He's not sending them out unprepared. He is sending them out in groups so that they can support one another. In the area that one is lacking, the other can reinforce that area. In the following verses, we're going to see the terms and conditions and the manner in which the apostles are to conduct themselves. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:8. He charged them to take nothing for their journey except a walking stick, no bread, no wallet for a collection bag, no money in their belts, girdles, purses. 6:9. But to go with sandals on their feet, and not to put on 2 tunics, undergarments. So the apostles here are commanded to bring very limited supplies with them when they go on their ambassadorship. We see that they are to take their walking stick and their sandals, and probably a set of clothes as well, but very limited. They're not to have 2 tunics. If you had 2 tunics on, you could probably stay a lot warmer, especially at night. They're not to bring food, so they'll have to get food elsewhere. The Lord will provide the food for them. The wallet, they don't need the money. They don't want to look like they're fleecing people to make a profit. That's a terrible look. And it is something that the church struggles with today. There's so many churches that have the appearance, in many cases, they do this, where they fleece the flock. They get into the ministry to get rich. And that is something that it was never intended for, as demonstrated by Jesus' command here for the apostles. Let's go a little further and see some more verses on this topic. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:10. And he told them, wherever you go into a house, stay there until you leave that place. 6:11. And if any community will not receive and accept and welcome you, and they refuse to listen to you, when you depart, shake off the dust that is on your feet for a testimony against them. Truly, I tell you, it will be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah in the judgment day than for that town. So the people in these towns are the ones that provide the hospitality. They provide the food and shelter for the disciples and the apostles. And the apostles, they heal people, they cast out demons, and they teach. And they stay there for a period of time, and then once their work is done, or the Lord tells them to move on, then they leave and they go to the next city or town. And they're just to repeatedly do this. And we see here there's an example. Well, what if the city doesn't welcome them in? Well, then they dust off their boots and they go to the next city. And we see that there's a very severe judgment for those that reject them. We see that it is more tolerable to be Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah, we saw that in Genesis, they were wiped off the face of the earth. Fire and brimstone rained down on those cities and totally destroyed them. They were very wicked places. So if it's more tolerable to have fire and brimstone rain down upon a given location, that is a very severe indictment. And we're going to see later on why exactly that is. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:12. So they went out and preached that men should repent, that they should change their minds for the better, and heartily amend their ways with abhorrence of their past sins. 6:13. And they drove out many unclean spirits, and anointed with oil many who were sick, and cured them. So the apostles were obedient to Jesus and did his work that he commanded of them. And they went to these different cities and these different towns, and they preached the gospel of repentance and healed the sick and cast out spirits. So it was a good thing that they were doing. The gospel according to Mark. 6:14. King Herod heard of it, for Jesus' name had become well known. He and they of his court said, John the Baptist has been raised from the dead. That is why these mighty powers of performing miracles are at work in him. 6:15. But others kept saying, it is Elijah, and others said, it is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. So up until this point, we have been looking at the life of Jesus and the things that he has been doing and the great works and miracles that he has performed. But now we are seeing it from a different perspective, the perspective of the leadership of the country. I'm sure they were hearing rumors of this healer and the healing that he was performing, the casting out of demons, and perhaps even the teaching that he was doing. So this is the conversation of the leadership. We have Herod the king. So for a little bit of context, the empire or the kingdom of Judea, whose capital city was Jerusalem, was conquered by the Romans in 63 BC. And when they conquered it, they essentially made it into a vassal state. And they had allowed a local ruler to rule that vassal state. And that's where Herod the Great comes in. He was the one that led that area, Judea, after Rome conquered it. And then when he died, the kingdom was split between his descendants. Herod Archelaus, Herod Antipas, and Philip are all his sons. So there was other ones as well. So now with that background, King Herod Antipas is the one that's the leader of this particular region at the time of this. So we have this throne room discussion now, and they're discussing these miracles, and Herod thinks that this is John the Baptist. He had a lot of guilt after having him executed, and we're going to see the reasons for why he was executed here in a little bit, but it was something that really bothered him. So there was also a rumor going around that this was Elijah. Now, Elijah is the forerunner, which is the role that John the Baptist had. So they saw these events and they attributed it to Elijah, that idea of the forerunner. So in some ways they were right, but in others they were wrong because the forerunner was already there and was executed, and the one that the forerunner was forerunning for, which was Jesus, was here, and he was the one performing all these miracles. So they were close, but they were off as well. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:16. But when Herod heard of it, he said, this very John, whom I beheaded, has been raised from the dead. 6:17. For this Herod himself had sent and seized John and bound him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because he, Herod, had married her. 6:18. For John had told Herod, it is not lawful, and you have no right to have your brother's wife. 6:19. And Herodias was angry, enraged with him, and held a grudge against him, and wanted to kill him, but she could not. 6:20. For Herod had a reverential fear of John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and continually kept him safe under guard. When he heard John speak, he was much perplexed, and yet he heard him gladly. So this is one of those lifestyles of the rich and famous, those who decide that they are above the law, above the rules. So Herod, he wanted to marry his brother's wife. So there's this whole setup and this whole ruse to get this divorce so that he is able to marry her. And John the Baptist said that he can't do that. This is not lawful for him to do. And because John the Baptist had quite the following, and a lot of people heard this, and it was a very frowned upon thing as a result. And Herodias, the woman in all this, the one that was first married to Philip, she really didn't like this. And her mother didn't really like this. And they wanted to get back at John the Baptist for speaking out against this pathway to a different spouse. The Gospel according to Mark 6:21. But an opportune time came for Herodias, when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his nobles and high military commanders and chief men of Galilee. 6:22. For when the daughter of Herodias herself came in and danced, she pleased and fascinated Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, "Ask me for whatever you desire, and I will give it to you." 6:23. And he put himself under oath to her, "Whatever you ask me, I will give it to you, even to the half of my kingdom." 6:24. Then she left the room and said to her mother, "What shall I ask for myself?" And she replied, "The head of John the Baptist." 6:25. And she rushed back instantly to the king and requested, saying, "I wish you to give me right now the head of John the Baptist on a platter." So there are numerous examples in the Old Testament of people making oaths and being bound by them, and them backfiring spectacularly and causing a lot of harm and damage and death. And here we have an example of that happening yet again. Here this man is on his birthday getting a dance, and after this dance is over, he makes an oath to the woman that gave him the dance. Up to half the kingdom, he says. She doesn't have an immediate answer for what is given to her, so she goes to her mother, and her mother says, "Well, how about the head of John the Baptist? He was kind of screwing them around by denouncing their marriage, so it is a good time to get even." So that's exactly what she does. She listens to her mother, goes back to Herod, and asks for the head of John the Baptist. Now, because he made this oath and he made it in the company that he did, we got all the officials around, all the rulers and politicians and whatever. He's the king, and all the important who's who are there at the party. So they're all witness to this oath. So he has to fulfill it. Even though it is not something that he wants, he got trapped into fulfilling this oath. In short term, the result of this is not good, but long term, it is even worse. A lot of people speculate that the reason why Israel was kind of wiped out after the time of Jesus was due to the inappropriate actions of its leader, that this was a judgment from God. The Gospel according to Mark 6:26. And the king was deeply pained and grieved exceedingly sorry, but because of his oaths and his guests, he did not want to slight her by breaking faith with her. 6:27. And immediately the king sent off one of his soldiers of his bodyguard, to give him orders to bring John's head, he went and beheaded him in the prison. 6:28, and brought his head on a platter and handed it to the girl, and the girl gave it to her mother. So John the Baptist was already in prison at this time. He was arrested and kept in confinement. And now Herod is sending one of his men down to execute him and to bring his head back. And he does exactly that. So imagine this. You're at a party and the guard leaves and he comes back with a head on a platter. Absolutely disgusting. Maybe that's just what parties are like for the rich and famous. Who's to say? The Gospel according to Mark. 6:29. When his disciples learned of it, they came and took John's body and laid it in a tomb. So these would be the apostles of John. They got word of what occurred here, and they recovered the body and they buried it. An unfortunate end to John the Baptist. It would have been nice to see more of him. He seemed like a pretty interesting man. But this was all part of God's plan, and he fulfilled his role as the forerunner, or the person that took on the role of Elijah, preparing the way for Jesus, as we saw in the beginning of the Gospel. Let us continue on. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:30. The apostles sent out as missionaries came back and gathered together to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. 6:31. And he said to them, as for you, come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. For many were continually coming and going, and they had not even leisure enough to eat. So the disciples, they went out on their mission. They did the work that Jesus instructed them to. And it looks like it was quite fruitful, and they were very busy. So they have returned from their first mission. And Jesus has given them permission and instructed them to take a little bit of a break. It's been so busy they haven't even been able to eat, so that's pretty busy. Probably from morning till night. And even night probably went on really late to the early morning, and then they started early in the morning, so they probably were hardly sleeping as well. Just a very busy time because they were so productive and they were getting so much done. It was just a wonderful time. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:32. And they went away in a boat to a solitary place by themselves. 6:33. Now many people saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all surrounding towns, and they got there ahead of those in the boat. 6:34. As Jesus landed, he saw a great crowd waiting, and he was moved with compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. So they went to take their vacation, to take their time off, but the people spotted them and they swarmed them. And we have Jesus getting off the boat, and he sees them and he realizes that they are sheep without a shepherd, and he is going to take on that mantle and be the shepherd for them. He is going to be the good shepherd. And so he teaches them. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:35. And when the day was already far gone, his disciples came to him and said, this is a desolate and isolated place, and the hour is now late. 6:36. Send the crowds away to go into the country and villages round about and buy themselves something to eat. So this was not a planned event. They didn't land their boat near civilization. They're out in the middle of nowhere and the people came to them. But now the day is getting late and it's getting around supper time. And these people, they're going to need food. And the disciples, they're thinking in worldly terms and they want to send these people. It's quite a journey to get where they are. And it's quite a journey to get to any location that would have food for them. And they're discussing this matter with Jesus. But what is his response going to be? Is he going to send the people away to get food, or is he going to provide an alternative and better solution? The Gospel according to Mark 6:37. But he replied to them, "Give them something to eat yourselves." And they said to him, "Shall we go and buy 200 denarii, about $40, worth of bread to give it to them to eat?" So Jesus commands his disciples to feed these people. And the disciples are kind of perplexed with this. They don't really have any food and they would have to go to town, and maybe that's what he is suggesting. Jesus is suggesting for them to go to town and buy food and bring that back to feed all these people. But that is not what Jesus is suggesting here. He is suggesting for them to feed the people through faith. Now, there's an example of this happening in 2 Kings chapter 4, in which there was all these hungry people, and a man was giving his first fruits to the Lord, and he had 20 loaves of bread, and with those 20 loaves of bread, they were able to feed 100. So we have a precedent for a miracle like this to occur, where food is able to feed far more than it really should. The disciples were thinking in worldly ways. They were not in tune with what Jesus was actually saying or the meaning behind his words. So let us continue. The Gospel according to Mark 6:38. And he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they had looked and knew, they said, 5 loaves and 2 fish. 6:39. Then he commanded the people all to recline on the green grass by companies. 6:40. So they threw themselves down in ranks of hundreds and fifties with the regularity of an arrangement of beds of herbs, looking like so many garden plots. So they do an inventory check to see how much food they have, and they find 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Now, the loaves of bread back then are probably not all that different in size to bread today, and a man would probably eat a whole loaf of bread every day. So if this was one of the meals out of 3, you get 3 guys eating a loaf of bread, so probably 15 people. And the fish, that just kind of goes with it. They're probably normal size fish. So realistically, if you're pushing it, probably around enough food for 15 people, and it's a very light meal. Certainly not enough food for the amount of people that are here. When we see the people being divided in groups of hundreds and fifties, so there's probably several thousand people there. Of course, that is the way that the disciples would have been looking at it. How could this possibly be enough to feed them? Well, we'll see how. The Gospel according to Mark 6:41. And taking the 5 loaves and 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and praised God, gave thanks and broke the loaves, and kept on giving them to the disciples to set before the people. And he also divided the 2 fish among them all. 6:42. And they all ate and were satisfied. 6:43. And they took up 12 small hand baskets full of broken pieces from the loaves and of the fish. 6:44. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. So as Jesus divided this bread and these fish, they were able to feed 5,000. And they took back leftovers that sound like they're more than what they initially started with. And these people too, they didn't just eat till they were a little bit full. They ate till they were stuffed. They just kept eating. So this was probably a tremendous amount of food. I wouldn't be surprised if there was more than 10,000 pounds or 4,500 kilograms of bread. And probably just as much fish as well. Truly an incredible miracle. So the people, they came out to the middle of nowhere, they listened to Jesus teach, and they were fed a good and hearty meal. How great is that? That's just awesome. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:45. And at once he insisted that the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he was sending the throng away. 6:46. And after he had taken leave of them, he went off into the hills to pray. So after this incredible miracle and everybody was full, it was getting later in the day and it was time to end this party. So we have Jesus sending his disciples back, getting them on the boat and crossing the water. He was going to catch up with them later. They didn't know really how he was going to do that, but that's neither here nor there. And the rest of the crowd, they had to go return to their own towns and villages. So he sent them off as well. And after which Jesus was alone. And what was he going to do when he was alone? Well, pray, of course. So he goes into the hills and he prays. That shows just how important that is to do. Whenever you get through a tough situation or a big event, it's good to go to prayer, like Jesus. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:47. Now when evening had come, the boat was out in the middle of the lake, and he was by himself on the land. I'm sure in those days before they had flashlights and other technology, people avoided being out after dark, for visibility was very difficult. So Jesus sent these people away with time so that they could actually get home before it got too late. And then he prayed, so he probably prayed for quite some time. But now it's getting dark and it's in the evening, and we're going to see what happens next. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:48. And having seen that they were troubled and tormented in their rowing, for the wind was against them, about the 4th watch of the night, between 3 and 6 a.m., he came to them, walking directly on the sea, and he acted as if he meant to pass by them. The weather and the current are not the greatest, and the guys out in the boat, they're not really making the progress that they would like to be. And they're really in a struggle just to try to get to where they need to go. And during these struggles, they look out, and what do they see? They see Jesus walking on the water. And it looks like he's ignoring them. He's just going to walk right on past them, and this is certainly a scary thing to witness. Probably all illuminated by moonlight and whatever amount of moonlight there is. It's hard to say how much they were able to see, but I'm sure this was quite the event. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:49. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost, and raised a deep, throaty shriek of terror. I imagine this situation and their reaction to be fully justified. They're there minding their own business, struggling just to keep the boat moving. Seeing somebody, of course they're going to scream in terror. It is a very unexpected thing, something that should not happen. Now Jesus didn't have to come here this way. He didn't have to do everything like this. But he did all this for a specific reason, as we're going to see. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:50. For they all saw him, and were agitated, troubled, and filled with fear and dread, But immediately he talked with them and said, "Take heart, I am. Stop being alarmed and afraid." 6:51. And when he went up into the boat with them, and the wind ceased, sank to rest as if exhausted by its own beating. And they were astonished exceedingly beyond measure. 6:52. For they failed to consider or understand the teaching and meaning of the miracle of the loaves. In fact, their hearts had grown callous, had become dull, and had lost the power of understanding. So this whole event here is a little bit of a chastisement towards the disciples. They didn't really appreciate or ask the proper questions regarding the miracle of the loaves. Perhaps they have seen too many miracles now and they have just grown callous or desensitized to the nature of these miraculous things, and they didn't ask him about it or inquire about it in the proper way. So he separated from them, let them get into the water and their boat, and then he showed up in the middle of the night and gave them quite the fright. After which he came on the boat, ended the storm so they didn't have to paddle so much, and he explained these things to them that they didn't understand about this miracle. I think events like this probably happen all the time, where God is looking to teach and we are unwilling to learn, so he has to explain things a little bit more clearly, sometimes under a less than ideal situation, a little bit more stressful than what would have been required had we listened and learned the first time. So sometimes there are hard lessons that are uncomfortable. The Gospel according to Mark. 6:53. And when they had crossed over, they reached the land of Gennesaret and came to anchor at the shore. 6:54. As soon as they got out of the boat, the people recognized him. 6:55. And they ran about the whole countryside and began to carry around sick people on their sleeping pads or mats to any place where they heard that he was. 6:56. And wherever he came into villages or cities or the country, they would lay the sick in the marketplaces and beg him that they might touch even the fringe of his outer garment, and as many as touched him were restored to health. So it seems as if we have hit a stage of saturation where Jesus' reputation has grown to an exceeding amount. It doesn't seem to matter where he goes. People seek him out for healing. They drag out their sick and wounded so that they can touch the fringe of his garment and be restored. This is a good thing. But at the same time, there are those who are conspiring to kill him. But we're not quite there yet. There's some more things that need to happen before that happens.